to Bear Creek Council's Living with Wolves program. I'm Alona Popper. Bear Creek Council is a grassroots organization based in Gardner, Montana, and we live near Yellowstone National Park. We're a uniquely wild area, and Bear Creek Council has worked for 34 years to protect wildlife, prevent mining pollution, guard our rivers, and support our community. We've placed solar panels on our school, given out bear-resistant garbage cans, and many other programs. If you're interested, you'll find links for joining Bear Creek Council today along the feed. This is the first in Bear Creek Council's Living with Wildlife program. We're going to be seeing living with cougars and living with bears as well. Here we invite expert biologists to talk and answer questions about living among or moving safely among wild species like wolves. Our small town is surrounded by national park and national forest. Wolves, cougars, bears, elk, moose, bison. These animals are our neighbors. Interesting, complex, but usually shy neighbors. This morning when I took my walk, I passed a field where horses are wintering, and there sharing the hay that was spread out was a cow elk. When I passed, the horses didn't even raise their heads. But she lifted her head and scrutinized me the whole way past. When I came back, she had moved into the browse, into some willow. And once again, she watched me the whole way. That may be one of the big differences between the wild and the domestic. But the point is, here they mingle. And sometimes with these neighbors, there can be misunderstandings. There can be misunderstandings with any neighbors. And sometimes you wonder about their behavior. Sometimes you might think about your own. If you don't like your neighbors, you can always leave. Or in a harsh world, you might decide to wipe them out. But usually people figure out how to live with their neighbors. And that's what this program's about. Figuring out how best to live with our wild neighbors and how to prevent problems before they start. This program is also about how to be a good guest. Even if you don't live in wolf country, you'll want to know how to stay safe and be a good visitor to the lands that wolves inhabit. This is for you, and it's also for the wolves. Now, these mega species may sound ferocious to you, but in a lot of ways, they're vulnerable. Wolf, lion, bear species are still in recovery in the United States. Wolves once covered the world, and then they were nearly obliterated. Because of the Endangered Species Act, reintroduction, and the wolves recolonizing themselves, wolves now inhabit Montana, Idaho, Wyoming, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, California, Oregon, Washington, Arizona, New Mexico, South Carolina, and Alaska, and they're still dispersing. We're going to hear from two wolf biologists today, and then you'll get to ask some questions. Now, we do request that you use the Q&A or question and answer feature in your Zoom, on your Zoom panel. That's the place we're going to be looking for your questions, not inside the chat. Our first speaker is Doug Smith, PhD. He's the head of the Yellowstone Wolf Project. He's a senior wildlife biologist in Yellowstone National Park. Doug supervises the wolf, elk, bird, beaver, and wildlife aviation programs in Yellowstone, formerly 3 jobs, now 1. He was originally hired in 1994 to reintroduce wolves to Yellowstone, so has been with the wolf program since its inception. He previously studied wolves in Isle Royale National Park and in northwestern Minnesota, including Yellowstone. This period spans 42 years of studying wolves. He's published over 90 peer-reviewed scientific articles, 4 books, including the newest, Yellowstone Wolf, Science and Discovery in the World's First National Park, numerous popular articles, and typically Doug gives over 50 talks or lectures annually. Since arriving in Yellowstone, he's given over 2,000 interviews, including CBS 60 Minutes, BBC, National Geographic, NPR, and many other national and local media outlets. Thank you for joining us today, Doug. We look forward to your telling us about living with wolves.
Okay, thank you for that, Ilona. I guess it can be painful to hear someone talk about you, so I'll try and recover from that introduction. And it's great to be here today and share this with Bear Creek Council, Northern Plains, and Ty from Fish, Wildlife, and Parks. And so a lot of my time is spent talking about wolves and studying wolves, ecology, behavior, population dynamics, predator-prey relationship, things like that. But today's mostly about how wolves interact with people, people interact with wolves. And so Ty and I have kind of split up our discussion based on our roles that we play. I'm based in a national park, and he's based on a landscape across the state of Montana. And so many of the issues are the same, but there are some different aspects to them. And really, in a lot of ways, this is where wolf ecology, biology begins. Because wolves have had, and Ilona mentioned a little bit of this, a long, difficult history with people. And we really have clashed. And amongst all our wildlife, they are one of the harder species that we've had to live with. And it doesn't have to be that way, but it has been that way, and they're still challenging. And so a lot of the things that we look at in the park are the biological carrying capacity for wolves. But some of the things, say, that Ty might look at, or Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, might be the social carrying capacity that people have for wolves. In other words, how many wolves are allowed to live in a certain area, and that's up to people. And certainly when we reintroduced wolves in 95, 96, 97 to Yellowstone and central Idaho, we didn't grow more wolf habitat. I mean, if anything, wildlife habitat for wolves has been on the decline because human population has grown, especially in the greater Yellowstone ecosystem. Yet we got wolves back. And that has been because of an increase in human tolerance. And actually, wolves were previously thought to be a wilderness species. They're actually not. They can live very nicely and closely to people, but it usually conflicts arise in various forms. And so I think a talk like this that these different groups are sponsoring is important and timely. And so I'm going to focus primarily on the park. And really what I want to do is make wolves not be a big deal. And I don't think they should be anywhere. But they're made into a big deal because we have all this mythology and stories and legend. But if you treat wolves like you treat other wild animals, everything will be fine. I'm here in my office in Yellowstone National Park at park headquarters in Mammoth, and there's elk and bison running around all year long. And when I walk outside my office and go building to building, I'm worried about running into a cow elk with a calf, and she's very dangerous, probably more dangerous than any wolf you'll ever come across. So I treat her with care and caution and alertness on my part. And essentially, that's the story of wolves anywhere you can occur. But for sure in Yellowstone is you want to keep your distance. So those are the two primary things that I want to emphasize about living with wolves. The key is keep your distance and be alert to their behavior. Those two things all the time. I mean, I go for a hike in Yellowstone, and with bears here, that's what I'm thinking about. And now that I've brought up bears, behavior around bears and wolves are very similar. For one, we have a park regulation, and this will work anywhere outside the park, is we require that you stay 100 yards from bears and wolves. So if you're doing that, the wolf is not going to get habituated. The wolf is not going to get its natural behavior disturbed, usually, not always. And you're going to be fine. You're not going to have any issues with large carnivore attack or anything like that. So the most important thing is to be alert to your surroundings and keep that distance. And we do have law enforcement rangers in the park, And we have another regulation that is you cannot disturb the natural behavior of an animal at any distance. It could occur a quarter mile. And, but the rule is 100 yards. You can't approach these animals and if you get closer than that, who knows, you might get a ticket. It's always a judgment call on the ranger's part. And it's up to you to maintain that distance. So if you're on the road and the wolf's 50 yards off the road, you have to go down the road and be at an angle to maintain that distance. And so that's the first very important thing about living with wolves in Yellowstone is keep that distance and then watch them. The same thing's true for bears. Animal behavior, human behavior. You watch people all the time. You know what your friends or your family are going to do based on watching their behavior. You can do that with wildlife as well. A wolf should be uneasy around people. That's natural wolf behavior. So if you see them at a distance, in a park, these wolves see people a lot. They're going to be tolerant of you, not habituated. That's bad. I'll talk about that in a minute. But there's 4 million visitors a year. They know what you are, but they should be in a hurry to get away. Trotting across the road at a distance, looking at you over their shoulder. There's a person, I know it. They're going to have a more extreme response outside the park where they're hunted. In the park, they should just be aware and moving along. They shouldn't be stopping, looking at you, hooking onto you, maybe ambling towards you. They start doing that, you're going to want to behave appropriately. And the first thing is you want to maintain that 100 yards. So you see a wolf, stop, look at you, for sure don't advance, stay in place, and maybe even retreat. Don't make abrupt movements. Don't run. All carnivores, it's built in, it's an innate response. When prey run, they chase. Dogs do it. So if you run, a bear, a wolf, a coyote, they're going to run after you. So keep your cool, but try and maintain that distance. Look at your view shed. Where can I go? What can I do? Stick with the people you're with, and try and move away. That wolf should not hook on you or approach you. And so you want to just let it go. And usually the wolf's not going to do anything else other than that. If it does continue to approach you and you're backing up and it's following you, you want to stay with the people you're with. Bear spray works very effectively on wolves like it does bears. So, use your bear spray if necessary, but it rarely will get to that point. That wolf's going to come towards you. It's probably going to be curious. Wolves are naturally very curious, even in hunted populations. In northern Canada and Alaska, in very remote settings, I've had wolves stop in the middle of nowhere and approach you. Working in the pens with wolves, I would have my head down, concentrating on activity, and before I know it, I'd look up, there's a wolf. So sometimes they're just curious. They're very exploratory about their world, so they might come in close. This isn't going to escalate, so keep your cool. Don't worry about it. But if this wolf comes in closer, now it's less than 50 yards, maybe closer than that, you probably want to start yelling, clap your hands, flare your jackets, group up with the people you're with, look big, and you want to be menacing to that wolf. And that's probably going to do it. But if it comes closer, use your bear spray. If it escalates to the point of very rare, this is diminishingly rare, but vanishingly rare, I should say, you'd fight back. You'd fight back. A bear, it's not the play dead routine with a bear, but with a wolf, if it comes to that, you're gonna fight like the Dickens. And so some things to be really aware of. If you have a dog on a leash, that's an attractant. Right now is right in the middle of the wolf breeding season. A dog in heat is going to be an attractant, but dogs in general, they're close enough related that it's competition. So a dog on a leash, you want to be aware of. The park has strict regulations about where you can take them in developed areas, picking up after them. But you don't want to bring your dog out of a car when wolves are around. Food is also a key one. Once wolves get food, it's a slippery slope to we might have to kill them, because that's a very quick way to get habituated. And it's the same with bears. It's almost the spoiler for wolves and bears. They get food, it's the beginning of the end. And, we have killed 2 wolves because they were coming up to people, they were approaching them, and it appeared that they had gotten food. One wolf was chasing folks on a bike and a motorcycle, but was walking up to pickup trucks, thinking something's going to fall out. Another wolf, someone laid down their pack and it completely tore the pack apart, to try, right next to the person to try and get the food in the pack. The same wolf approached a gentleman, just walked up to him, and he is taking pictures of the wolf. We have at the project here an interesting photo of a shadow of the guy standing over the wolf. The wolf you see from the picture, but you can see a camera in his hand, and the wolf's head is just moving around with the camera. Now that's indirect evidence, but it's pretty conclusive that he thought was in its hand was food. Coyotes have done the same thing in Yellowstone. And so food is a big no-no. In fact, Mark McNay, who worked for the Alaska Department of Game and Fish for 20 years as a wolf biologist, published a paper on habituated wolves in Canada and Alaska through the entire 20th century. No fatalities during that entire time. There have been 2 since. But, and these are I'm leaving out rabid wolves, but these are all non-rabid wolves. There's about, I should have looked this up but beforehand, I meant to, ran out of time, but 20 attacks. Most of the habituated wolves got food. So in other words, for wolves to become fearless of people, they're naturally fearful of people. And actually, it takes a while. They're never going to attack you, or they're never going to be comfortable around you on their first encounter. There's always a long process involved for them to become fearless, multiple encounters around people. And it usually, but doesn't always involve food. They can become habituated by just exposure, but food's the worst. And in fact, 6 of those 20 cases that Mark wrote about were Alaska pipeline workers feeding them part of their sandwich from lunch. They're working on the pipeline, they're taking a break, and a wolf comes up to them and they flip on a sandwich. And a few of those guys got bit, because, they want food every time. And so that led to some of his 20 attacks. So, food is pretty important. Dogs are pretty important. Keeping that distance is really important. And then watching their behavior. So what happens if things go bad? You do want to fight back. And we have not had wolves do anything to people in Yellowstone. It's very rare, but it's very different from the bear response. But like I said, we've killed 2 wolves because we thought they were food conditioned and they were clearly fearless of people. And so we want to emphasize not getting close to them, because if it gets bad enough, we might have to take them out. And so, we don't want to do that. And then secondly, it can affect their longevity outside the park. So if they get too used to you or too habituated, too calm around you, they leave the park and they're not wary of people, and that's a hunted population. And then those wolves become more vulnerable to hunter harvest. And, fair chase is a big part of the North American model of wildlife management. The animal has a fair chance to get away. That's kind of built into the hunting ethic. And if folks in the park, visitors, have made these wolves not, they're accustomed to people, you're going to make them more vulnerable outside the park. And these wolves, typically, the park wolves, or wolves that live mostly in the park, are living in the park 95% of the time. So they're not leaving the park much, but they do. And we want them to have a decent amount of respect for people. So I think that's a reason why you should care. So you don't make these animals comfortable around people. Another thing that's really important is to report habituated or fearless behavior of wolves. Talking to some rangers about this, and this happens more often with coyotes, but, quite often a ranger will talk to a visitor or a frequent someone who's out a lot, a wolf watcher, and he'll say, geez, is this animal causing a problem? And, oh yeah, I've been seeing this wolf walk up to people for a couple months now. Again, more common for a coyote. Um, Habituated behavior, fearless behavior, please report to a ranger who are out. You might see them on the road, or if you don't, report at a visitor center, or stop by the wolf office in Mammoth or something. But we would like to know about this, because the other tool that we have is hazing. And we've been hazing successfully for about 20 years. When we wrote the habituated wolf management plan for Yellowstone, the reviewer feedback we got was hazing doesn't work, just kill them. And because we're a national park, we really want to take our best shot at trying to coexist with wildlife. I mean, if you can't do it here, where else can you do it? And so we've tried hazing, and over the years we have found it very successful. You usually have to do it at teachable moments. That means kind of the wolves get the idea that they're doing something wrong, and you hit them hard with non-lethal munitions like bean bags, rubber bullets. Another one's an exploding round from a shotgun called a cracker shell. Even clear paintballs. They don't put the paint on them, but we fired those at the wolves. I've run after wolves and thrown rocks at them, and if you act crazy enough, they think you're a madman and they run away. Anyways, these are all different forms of hazing, and we have found them to be quite effective. And so we want to know about it, and so we can target that individual. In fact, we got a wolf out there right now, 1273 of the Junction Butte Pack, who, when the park was closed for 3 months this last spring due to COVID, was a huge problem. And he was very accustomed to people, probably because he was exposed to people on the Slough Creek Trail as a little puppy. And when the adults would leave, the pups were unattended. They got bored and they ran to the trail and interacted with people. And this is the absolute worst thing that you could do. This has happened in Banff. Photographers have found rendezvous sites. They've interacted with small pups. Those pups grow up to be real big problems. And Banff has done full pack removal or partial pack removal, because these wolves are going through car campgrounds the next year when they're yearlings. They're big, they're full grown, and they're going right into camps, jumping up on picnic tables, eating dog food that's left out by motorhomes. I mean, the whole 9 yards. The hazing doesn't work. And so, again, this distance thing, and if they're little puppies and they're along a trail, you got to stay away from them, or they grow up to be bad. And that's what happened to 1273. He was part of that Junction Butte Pack litter near the trail. He grew up to be a big problem. And, to put it bluntly, we pounded him last spring when the park was closed with these non-lethal munitions. I mean, pounded him. A researcher got him with bear spray, and he's turned the corner. He hasn't been that bad lately. We think he's okay. It was a lot of work, though, and it was a problem. And we discussed taking him out. I mean, that was on the table. And so these things that you can do, our wolves choose to interact with you, can have severe ramifications. Like, we have an expression, every now and then you feed them, we kill them. So this proper behavior around them, again, emphasize the little puppy stage, is key. And we got the Wapiti pack right now, the most habituated pack in the park. They're comfortable roadside. We've been staking them out all winter, because about a month ago, they were on the snowmobile road, the road that leaves Old Faithful, within 10 feet of people, and snowmobiles were sitting 10 feet away from wolves sitting there next to each other. Just everybody's kind of enjoying themselves. And I mean, this could lead to the demise of the Wapiti pack. They go down to Grand Teton, they travel around, they sit in the middle of the road. The rangers down there are turning on their sirens. The wolves don't do anything, just sit in the middle of the road. They've almost been hit by a plow down there because they use the road so much. I mean, this does not lead to good things for the wolves. So what do you do if they're on a snowy road in Yellowstone, and they don't like going off to the side because it's deep snow and they're not stupid. They're going to take the pack trail. Everyone wants to see a wolf, get a picture. We're not asking you to blast by them, but we are asking you to get as far away from them on the road as you can and slowly drive by. Hold your camera in one hand, get a pictures, but don't sit there with them for 10, 20 minutes. Snow coaches are the same. You got to keep moving. And if you want to look at them, you got to stop 100 yards back when you see them up there on the road, sitting there, and maybe sit there at 100 yards from them and let them camp out. They might not move, but if they come towards you, you're going to have to stay 100 yards away. Or because it's maybe not practical in that wintry environment, you got to get by them. But you can't sit with them at 10 yards like these snowmobilers were doing. So what we do? All the rangers, we had to get special permission to do it. We're riding around with their snowmobiles with shotguns in cases, with rubber bullets, beanbag rounds, cracker shells, waiting to haze those wolves. Okay, so big pain in the neck to do that, but that's the Wapiti pack. When they're exposed to people, we got to do it, and they've had a long history of winter environment next to the road with people, which will lead us to hurt them or kill them, and or they leave the park, makes them easy targets. So these things can have bad endings. And so we're asking you to keep your distance and watch wolf behavior and have a safe approach to these wolves. Watch food, watch dogs, report any fearless or habituated behavior to a ranger or at a visitor center. And that's, I think, most of the points that I had. Hopefully that's helpful. If I didn't cover anything, we have the question and answer period. So thank you, and I'll turn it over to Ty.
Thank you so much, Doug. That's great. And we are getting questions coming in, and we want to see your questions. Please feel free to use the Q&A feature. We're going to get to as many questions as we can for both Ty and Doug. So our next speaker is Ty Smucker. He is the Wolf Management Specialist for the Montana Department of Fish, Wildlife, and Parks for North Central and Eastern Montana. He's been involved in wolf monitoring and management in Montana since 2002. He completed his undergraduate degree at Northland College in northern Wisconsin, where he was introduced to wolf tracking and monitoring. He went on to work with wolves in northern Minnesota and Yellowstone National Park and Canada lynx in the Sealy Swan area of Montana. His fascination with interactions between predators and prey also took him to Hawaii, where he spent several years studying the effects of introduced predators on endangered native Hawaiian birds. He completed his master's degree in wildlife biology at the University of Montana, examining how habitat and predation influence bird abundance and nest survival in riparian corridors. Ty is an avid observer of wildlife and father of two very inquisitive daughters. Without further ado, Ty, welcome, and we look forward to hearing what you have to say about living with wolves.
Okay, thanks, Alona. And Doug, you're right, that is painful to sit through. Someone talking about yourself. Yeah, as Alona mentioned, I'm one of our wolf management specialists for Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks. So deal with wolves outside of the national parks. We also have wolves in Glacier National Park to the north of me. And and a whole lot of people that live in Montana, and even more people moving to Montana in recent years, and particularly this last year. So everyone wants to live in Montana on the edge of the wilderness with some deer and elk in there that they can see from their window. So we have resident humans as opposed to a lot of visitors like we have, like folks haven't seen the park. So it's a different animal to speak of. Some people that move here or have lived here are used to wildlife and have kind of figured out how to deal with wildlife. Other people really don't really realize what it means to have a herd of elk as your neighbors or deer. And so it's a learning process. That's part of my job. So again, Doug mentioned outside the parks, really it's social tolerance of our predators that kind of drives management of the predators, like wolves, lions, black bears, grizzly bears, coyotes as well. And so for wolves, they primarily live in western and into central Montana. So north of Yellowstone National Park, up through the belt, the Island Range Mountains, we have some wolves showing up out there, and then Glacier National Park, the Rocky Mountain front. And everything to the west of there consistently has wolf packs, resident wolf packs. And some of them have been around for quite a long time. Along the front, we've had wolves in the Bob Marshall for a good 20 years now. So people are getting used to them. Some folks are. So what ends up happening is we have people living in close proximity with large predators outside the park, whether it's Paradise Valley, Cook City, the Bitterroot, for example, and Flathead Valley. You get a lot of folks that live outside of town, have some acreage, whether or not they're full-blown cattle production in the livestock business or they're a hobby farmer. We have people living on the edge of these areas where deer and elk winter, and that brings, or spend the whole year, and that brings humans and their pets into conflict with wolves. So I'm going to go through a few things. I appreciate Doug kind of talking about the actual human risk and the fact that there have only been 2 confirmed fatalities for wolves, and most of those have been the attacks have been due to humans feeding wolves and wolves becoming habituated to humans. And some of those have been in the national parks in Canada, in the US. So habituating is always bad for carnivores, especially. A lot of people that move here or live here, Sealy Swan area where I worked for a while, we have people feeding deer. A lot of people love to see the deer or the turkeys, and they'll feed them on purposely. Of course, in the agricultural areas, they're feeding livestock, and elk will key in on that resource as well. So again, that putting elk and deer in close proximity of humans, and that brings predators start coming around too. We see lions keying in on areas where people are feeding turkeys and white-tailed deer. And then people don't appreciate the lions being around or the pack of wolves that they're neighbors with as well, start showing up a little more often. So again, we get calls from folks who are worried about their pets, worried about their livestock or their goats or alpacas, or their children or grandchildren waiting at the bus stop and whatnot. And whether or not these are real or perceived threats, they're real to the people that are perceiving the threats. So it's something we have to address. And people do tend to, in the park and outside the park, people tend to have pretty big ideas about wolves and other predators. A lot of movies out there and mythology suggesting that wolves are always around, hiding somewhere, waiting to attack us. So in reality, most wolves are pretty darn fearful of humans, especially outside the parks. Most of the time, once they realize that you're a human, they're going to leave the area as quickly as they can. Wolves are, however, very curious and naive. Some of them are naive, especially the pups and yearlings come following fall and winter. And they might not know better. They might not have seen very many humans or have experience with that. I see when I've encountered wolves in the wild, one thing that you see kind of with deer as well is they will, if they're not sure what you are, they might stand there and check you out. And some people perceive that as a threat in and of itself, just the wolf standing there and looking at you the wrong way, menacingly. Whether or not they're actually doing that, it's perceived as that's what they're doing. But what you often see is wolves will try and travel to get downwind of you and get your scent. And then once they get your scent, you might not see them again. Hopefully they'll be out of there as quickly as they can. A lot of times, if you end up encountering a rendezvous site or a den site or a kill where wolves are in the area and defending pups or a resource, they will bark at you or howl at you. From close range, a wolf howl can, even on my, the hairs on the back of your neck will stand up. I don't know if that's a instinctual thing or what, but it goes right through you. It's pretty intimidating. And for some people that causes them to be afraid that the wolves are going to surround them. And sometimes it sounds like they are surrounding you, but almost every time those wolves, if they know you're human, even if there are pups there, they're out there playing and have no idea those adults are going to be back in the woods where you can't see them. They're going to be howling and trying to do their best to intimidate you and get you to leave the area. But very rarely will you actually see them if they realize that you're a human. So there's a lot of things to do if you are encountering wolves out in the wild or out your back door, I guess. If they're being bold and not recognizing you as a human or not appearing to be afraid of you, as Doug mentioned, it's very good to, let them know that you're a human, stand tall, make some noise, clap, try and intimidate them to the extent that you can, and keep your distance. Don't be approaching the wolves, that's the biggest part is that they're wild animals, and you never know what they're going to do. More people are killed by cow moose in Alaska than have ever been killed by wolves. So you just have to learn to respect the wildlife that are out there. And let me see here. Yeah, so again, you just want to stay calm, leave slowly if you can, make some noise, stand tall, let them know you're human. The biggest thing is never run away from a predator. Their instincts are to chase things that run away from them, and hopefully they have enough fear of humans to realize that they shouldn't chase you. But for young naive wolves, that might not always be the case, or if they're conditioned. Another thing we run into is hunters with meat. There's this big fear now with grizzly bears are becoming more widely distributed and are stealing people's elk after they're harvested. We don't see that as much with wolves. In fact, it's pretty rare for wolves to move in on a kill. What I often do is if I have to leave some out there, I'll put a game bag over it or a jacket, something to just deter the scavengers or predators from coming in and trying to eat that. Probably isn't going to deter a grizzly bear, but wolves are pretty cautious. They usually, a lot of times when we try and put carcasses out and get wolves to come into a camera trap or something, it takes them a while. They won't approach that carcass for a long time, and because they're nervous about the human scent around it and whatnot. So, and again with wolves, bear spray is highly effective on them too. And if they are becoming habituated or conditioned to humans, a good dose of bear spray at close range will probably cure them of that. So, the other thing with people living near humans is their dogs, and we've seen a couple times even around the park, people let their dogs out at night and there's wolves happen to be coming past, and the dogs of course are going to run out if they know there's a wolf out there. They're going to run out there barking, and the wolves are probably not going to respond well to that because they view that dog as competitor. and especially particularly during the breeding season, we get more reports of if they den close enough to people's houses or ranches, and those dogs are barking, and they may go down there and kill them in the yard. But particularly if those dogs, people have dogs that are just let loose to wander around while the people are away at work, or wander around in the evening, be out at night, there's a good chance those dogs will get killed by lions or wolves. So it's something that a lot of people have learned the hard way. When you live near the wilderness, you don't really want to let your dogs run around free. And unfortunately, every year it does happen. Another thing we do see with dogs is if people have lion hounds, those dogs are out in the forest chasing lions or bobcats, and the wolves will key in that barking and try and track those dogs down, and have killed them in the past. It's actually a pretty big problem in Wisconsin, where they hunt black bears and bobcats with dogs, and there's, during the season, every week, it seems like there's somebody's dogs are getting killed. And that's not appreciated either. So it really kind of brews the hostility that some people have towards wolves. So again, for the most part though, folks that live, in Bozeman, Missoula, Gardner, those areas that are, surrounded by forested habitats, wilderness, national parks, in close proximity. Everybody moves to Montana because they love to recreate outdoors, and they love to take their dogs with them. What we see is people don't have their dogs on the leash. They're out there wandering around, and that puts your dog at risk of running into traps or snares, or encountering mountain lions or coyotes or wolves. Or as we've seen several times, people's dogs are out on the trail ahead of them, and they run into a grizzly bear or a black bear and come running back to the humans with that bear in tow. So it's really not a good idea. But again, people do love to explore the wilderness, and it seems cruel to have your dog on a leash while you're out there. So hopefully you have your dog relatively close and it's responsive, comes back to you. If you do have a dog that's out there in front of you, we've seen a few times where people are coming down the trail and there's a pack of wolves, or a lone wolf or a pack out in a meadow or something, and your dog's out ahead of you, and they see those wolves and they go running out to say hi and play with them. And we've actually had a few times where I have a range rider that had his dogs with him, was out riding, checking on cattle, and the dogs ran ahead and were playing with wolf pups, and the babysitter was up in the woods barking and howling at them, but the pups were down there playing, and then they continued on their way, and all was well. But probably not a good learning experience for those pups. And it could have easily resulted in some serious injuries or wolves and or dogs being killed. So that is something to keep in mind. And if your dog does is chased by wolves and comes running back to you, wolves will be really focused on those dogs. When they're chasing, they're focused on that critter they're chasing down, and they might not even see you. You can be yelling and screaming and getting in the way, getting in between, making sure that wolf realizes that there's a human there, which a lot of these trails, they kind of know dogs and humans are on these trails. So hopefully they've learned a little bit, but not always. So making sure those wolves realize that there's a human there is kind of the key. And if they do get into a tussle, you do not want to reach in there. If you have bear spray, your dog can probably handle a little bear spray. It's better than being ripped to shreds by a wolf. So just spray them both. And okay, so let me just double check here. So yeah, it's really good to keep your dogs under verbal control and close enough where you can get on them pretty quick and put them on a leash if need be. Again, we do see outside the park, we've got a lot of private property in Montana, and we have private livestock, whether they're cattle, sheep production, or it's just in the Bitterroot Paradise Valley, you've got, someone has horses, some goats, some sheep, some chickens. All those things can attract carnivores to come get an easy meal. And it's something that, we've been working hard with, especially with bears, to fence and keep those animals secure where we can. And it's something that people need to kind of realize where they're living, and that this is a risk that they need to do a little more to protect their livestock if they're living in that kind of country. And then, of course, on private property outside the park, people can, in self-defense, shoot wolves. And if there's problems with if they're depredating livestock, we can get wildlife services in there to confirm depredation, whether it's caused by wolves or a lion or a bear, or things just died on their own and were scavenged on. And that's a whole another realm of what we deal with wolves on the landscape in Montana. A part of our job is to help people protect their private property and their critters, their livestock, from the predators are out there and wolves. With hunting and trapping of wolves, we have seen fewer depredations. The packs aren't quite as big as they used to be in some places where people have access to humans. And so we do see fewer livestock depredations, fewer removals in response to livestock depredations. So like that's the whole picture of management. And then we're also putting a lot of effort into prevention of conflict, of trying to prevent wolves and bears from getting a taste for livestock in the first place. So it all ties together to let people live on the landscape in Montana with carnivores, with the ungulates, the deer and elk, and with the predators out there. So, and it's a learning game and a careful balance of using a whole lot of tools in the tool shed. So just gonna quick make sure I didn't forget anything important. As Doug said, keep your distance and don't run. Good advice. All right, I think I'll stop talking.
Thank you, Ty. That was great. We are getting lots of questions. Doug, why don't you join us again? And I'm going to try to do justice to all of these. Thank you, folks, for all your questions coming in. We're going to try to, as I say, get to as many as we can. The first question is about hazing. Does the state ever use hazing to manage troublesome wolves? What are the uses of hazing in depredation situations? Depredation, by the way, for everybody listening, is when wolves attack livestock, wildlife, instead of wildlife. So predation would be wolves eating their normal prey. So we'll start with Ty, but both of you can talk about the tools available to you with hazing. So for example, in your case, Ty, the difference between hazing wolves, say in a depredation situation versus hazing wolves in a situation where they might be in Gardner or Cook City.
Right, yeah, that is a very good point. I think with wolves in Cook City, one of the things that people point out is don't just open the door and let your dogs out. Kind of like with living with grizzly bears, you don't just open your door in the middle of the night without turning the light on and walk outside to go to the bathroom or something. You kind of look around, make sure there's not a grizzly bear out there. But same thing with letting your dog out at night. Wolves, maybe, turn on the light, make sure you're good to go. Make some noise, make sure if there is anything out there, it knows that you're a human and you're coming outside. But yeah, hazing is great for, especially if you've got wolves showing up where they shouldn't be. For example, in a neighborhood, up against the wilderness, where people are feeding deer and the wolves keep coming around. We can do cracker shells. It is very labor intensive. We've used all those tools that Doug described. I mean, cracker shells, rubber bullets, and electrified fencing. Turboflagery is a good one to keep, critters away from calving pastures and whatnot. Early on, working down in the Missoula area, we spent an inordinate amount of time, I would say, basically camping out with the wolves in our truck, sleeping in our trucks, and waking up every half hour or so and listening for wolves on the telemetry if they were coming toward the calving pasture or toward where the cattle were. Get out there with the ATV and fire off some cracker shells as long as the grass wasn't too dry and you started fire. So did a lot of that, just staying up all night, trying to keep wolves from eating people's livestock. It's very labor intensive. And probably in the long run, it's debatable about how effective it was, because it was usually an after the fact, once wolves have started killing stuff. So yeah, but all those tools are available, and the earlier you can use those tools, the better.
Doug, do you want to add anything to this one?
I mean, not really. I think Ty covered it really well. The park's a slightly different situation, but we do use the same hazing tools as Ty was talking about. We kind of have a graded response, because I think that you have a luxury with wolves that they're not going to go from A to Z quickly. In other words, they're not going to be, wary of people one day and the next day biting them. There's a process in between those two events, the first encounter with a human and they bite somebody. There's a lot of middle room. A grizzly bear, a sow with cubs, you don't have that leeway. She's going to be protective of that cub. She's going to attack you if she feels that cub's in danger. Wolves aren't like that, even around their den with their pups. And so the only reason I get into that is our response is usually on a continuum or a gradated response. We see a wolf that's behaving improperly. We get reports about that wolf that it's approaching people, or someone says this wolf came right up to me. Our first move is not to take it out. Our first move is, okay, let's see if low-level hazing works. Honking our horn at it, yelling at it, throwing rocks at it, whatever. And then you gradually go up the scale. Bean bags, rubber bullets, cracker shells, maybe all three at the same time. And you hit that wolf maybe multiple occasions, and you monitor the response. Is it responding to the hazing? And you usually need to have it at teachable moments. The wolf's walking off the side of the road in the sagebrush, bad time to haze it. They don't learn anything from that. But I forgot to mention in my talk, they're in a developed area. We do not want bears, coyotes, wolves in developed areas. You're just going to prophylactically haze them when they're in those situations. And again, with wolves anyways, I'll leave coyotes and bears out for a second. We want to do this graded response, start low, go heavy. And, the two wolves we shot and killed, the hazing wasn't working. You need to see a response. The animal turned the corner. And so, that's kind of our approach. I'm emphasizing the same things that Ty did in terms of tools. But what I didn't cover in my talk that I tried to cover here was what we do if we get a habituated wolf for any reason. And if they got food, sometimes it's hard to turn that corner away. Or, as I said, and Banff is the poster child of this, little pups, people have called them puppies, get exposed to people. That starts them off on a trajectory for life that is bad. And, so that's a key one. When they're an adult and they start doing bad stuff, I think hazing can be pretty effective. The other difference is, because both Ty and I are on here, This isn't private land, so we're trying to, save the wolf, protect the wolf. But our tools are public education, and that by far is the most important. Everything I said about distance and watching wolf behavior, and then hazing the wolf. So this happens because this did not happen. The public education, human behavior is what causes wolf to be habituated or food conditioned. So I'm not trying, again, government person, you're not supposed to backtalk to the public at all, but wolf problems are human caused, okay? At least in this arena that I'm talking about. So because humans always win, we will deal with that wolf and we'll start hazing it. And if that doesn't work, we'll kill it to protect people. So that's what, from a park messaging standpoint, I should have put that in my talk. Very compact, tight message. You behave properly, everything goes great. Wolves live. You behave improperly, we got to do something. You won't get blamed. You might get a ticket, but you'll live to see another day. That wolf might not. Very compact little thought there. So please, for the 119 people that are on right now, spread that word about wolf watching in Yellowstone, because if you do it wrong, the wolf pays.
So let me recap from what both you guys are saying. Maybe a clarification here. From the sound of it, when you're talking about habituation with people, it sounds like wolves are quite teachable and they're prone, unlike a grizzly, to run away. And if you keep that going by not feeding, by not rewarding them, that's going to take care of problems with wolf and attacking people. That be fair?
I forgot to mention, and I apologize for this, I'm seeing the weaknesses to my talk as I go along here. There's two key differences between a bear and a wolf. Key, very important. Bears are guided by their stomach. They feel hungry. They try and solve that problem right away. A bear eats every day. When they get hungry, they're going to do something about it. So they are driven by food. So you get a food conditioned bear, it wants human food. It knows about human food. That might be okay, I'm outside my lane here talking about bears, but that might be an unsolvable situation because they got to eat every day and their whole life is guided by their stomach. They're going to take human food. They're going to rip apart your car. They're going to rip apart your backpack. They're going to try and get your food on the food pole. They're going to find it. Wolves know the feeling of hunger and they live with it. That they don't eat every day. I mean, wolves, I forget what the literature says. Wolves have gone 2-3 weeks without eating. So they are a boom bust critter. They make a kill, they gorge themselves, they go several days without eating. They don't eat every day, not driven by their stomach. So food condition is bad for wolves. Don't get me wrong. And sometimes you can't turn them. It's worse for a bear, way worse. So if we get habituated wolf that's not food conditioned, we've had great success training or turning that wolf back in 1273 right now. Everyone knows about that wolf. Black wolf in the Junction Butte Pack was a bad apple this spring. Now it's the breeding season and he's thinking about other things at this moment, but he's in general not a bad apple now. We turned his corner. How did we do that? We pounded him hard with rubber bullets, bean bags, clear paintball rounds. He got a beating. And he was sometimes 10 feet away from the person doing the hazing. But the bear wolf thing in terms of living by your stomach or driven by your stomach versus the wolf knows the feeling of hunger and is going to still be afraid of people and try and avoid them. Whereas a bear is like, I'm hungry. I don't care that guy's standing right there. Okay, sorry about that.
No, not at all. So I'm going to, again, summarize, and Ty, we're going to get back to you. In fact, this next question, we're going to start with you. But, to summarize, there are these differences with the bear and the wolf. For sure, you're talking biologically, that make the wolf a different animal in terms of scaring them off of people. And scaring them off from people is easier to do with wolves. They're kind of pre-programmed to be wary and stay away. And so when things go awry, you've got wolves, something's gone wrong in terms of, people's behavior. Now, a lot of people were getting questions about depredation. That is wolves coming in, taking livestock. And, there's a lot, this is a thorny question. There's a lot with this one, but I think a couple things I'd like you guys to touch on. One would be, first of all, the numbers of depredations. How bad are wolves actually about killing livestock in Montana, for example? And is it possible to turn wolves who are depredating with non-lethal methods? I'm summarizing some of the questions I'm getting here. And then I'll just read a tiny bit of one gentleman's question from Germany. How many so-called problem wolves who killed sheep have been harvested during the time from 1994 to 95 until now? We got a problem wolf shot illegally the other day in Germany and has caused huge discussions. So I think his question is touching on, when you take out wolves that depredate, are you able to turn around that problem? Are you able to solve that problem? But I want you to start with talking about how bad a problem is depredation. How many depredations do wolves make? Ty, why don't you start?
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
sure on that one.
that's a big, lots of questions there.
It is. I'll break it down. I'll break it down for you.
No, it's okay. I think I got it. So,
Good.
outside the park, there's a very quick way to resolve problems with wolves, and that's lethally. And that's been happening since the reintroduction started. As soon as wolves were out on the landscape, even before, in Montana, we had wolves in the state before, and they were killing cattle in the 9 Mile, getting in trouble. And a lot of effort went into trying to get those wolves to stop eating cattle and focus on native ungulates. So now we have, since 2013, we have legislation basically that's in place in Montana where anybody with private property, whether it's livestock, pets, dogs, they're worried about their children, whether it's a real or perceived threat from the wolves. If they see wolves in their private property, and they don't want wolves in their private property, they can legally shoot them, and they can shoot them all if they want to. And this happens, occasionally we get, usually it's one wolf gets shot by somebody, and a lot of the ranchers will tell you that the opportunity to do that is very rare, even when they have a rifle with them most of the time. And it's just, very, very rarely are they actually able to shoot a wolf on their place. And, in some cases that may be the only wolf around. In other cases, it may be one out of a whole pack. So the depredations have fluctuated over the years with wolf numbers. The estimates we just came out with for wolves in the state is basically we have about 1,000 wolves in the state, and we've had 1,000 wolves in the state for a while now. That number is, peaked at around 1,150 wolves. And with hunting and trapping of wolves, we're seeing the wolf population is no longer just increasing exponentially. We can't really say that we're decreasing the wolf population. Our estimates are still in the same ballpark for wolf numbers. Since we have hunting and trapping on the landscape now, our wolf depredations, confirmed wolf depredations, have gone down, and the number of wolves that are removed in response to those depredations have gone down as well. And I think 2012 or 11 was our peak, and we had over 100 wolves removed for depredations. Was kind of the standard. Now it's below 50 wolves a year removed for depredations. So, and if you want to, all those numbers are in our annual reports. If folks wanted to look at that, or I could look it up while Doug's doing the next, taking the.
I actually know the number of
Oh.
wolf depredations,
There
not
you go.
not the number of wolves removed. 2016, 2017, I think it was 38 wolves, 38 lives, 38 goats, cattle, sheep were killed by wolves. And I know that I followed those numbers every year. So
Yeah.
we say now that on average, it's about 60 in a high year, 60 animals are killed by wolves in Montana. So
Mhm.
the percentage of kills by wolves in depredation is quite low. It's lower than the number of cattle that are killed by dogs, cattle that are killed by lightning. That's a little different from the numbers you're talking about, which are wolves that have been found to be harassing cattle, and then they're taking out those wolves. So that's a little bit different.
Mhm.
But actual depredation numbers, even since early reintroduction, have always remained quite low. In terms of total numbers of, or what the causes of death are with cattle. But you're speaking about a slightly different thing, Ty, and you go ahead. I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt.
No, that's fine. That's good. I'm glad you did that. So I guess one of the big differences between park is and outside the park is that wolves can still get in trouble or killed even if they are behaving properly, like they're supposed to. They don't have to misbehave or become habituated to be a problem. And people have the right in the state of Montana or Wyoming or Idaho, all those states surrounding, people have been, it's been constitutionalized now in all the states that people have a right to protect their private property from wolves or any predator really. And we don't really have much grounds to argue with them about it. Again, it's pretty rare that people actually have the opportunity or, to do that. And with having harvest on the landscape, we're removing about 300 wolves a year for that are being harvested by hunting and trapping. So let's see. I might have got off track. Bring me back in.
No, that's good. I think you're answering the questions actually.
Okay.
I think the one question from Germany that is is there a way of knowing whether the problem wolves are the ones being targeted when you're actually hunting?
Yeah, that's hard to know. Even when Wildlife Services goes out and tries to remove wolves after depredation, there's a question of, are these the wolves? With bears, it's a problem with bears too. How do you know you got the right animals? With GPS collars, we can often tell that animal was right there with its pack mates, and sure enough, they're the ones that did it. And it's a lot less rare now for whole packs to get removed. It used to be kind of once they started killing, they'd kill again and again. They just come down to the calving pasture every night and take more calves. And that needed to be resolved quickly because, while those numbers of cattle losses are very, very small. In fact, a good spring snowstorm probably kills more calves every year than all the predators combined. So, but those are additional losses for those livestock producers. And some of them are barely squeaking by anyway. The profit margins are small. Some years calf prices are higher, some years are lower. So they're land rich, but not necessarily money rich. So
Right.
so it hurts them when they it's like going to the bank once a year with your calves, and that's the money you make for the year. So so yeah, legitimate concern there. We have had people suggest, I was in my mind early on, can we get like a program to direct people who want to hunt and trap wolves to landowners, livestock producers that are having problems? And that really, they seem to be pretty capable of knowing people in their community that have the time and skills to go out and hunt and trap wolves in their area. It's not really something that wasn't really a viable option to send people from Bozeman out to somebody's ranch to try and shoot wolves. So yeah.
Thank you. Okay, let's see. We have some questions about dogs and wolves, and so I'll come back to those. Do you want to explain a little bit about the territoriality? You know, what the wolf thinks it's doing with dogs and wolves. I'm not sure everybody knows that wolves hold their territories and don't let other wolves in either, that they'll kill other packs. Doug, why don't you start, and then I have a follow-up dog question for Ty.
Yeah, sure. I mean, wolves are competitive by nature. So that means they're going to be, I mean, they're competitive between other packs. So that means they're going to be competitive with dogs. They're going to treat them as a threat or a potential mate. Dogs are, you know, when I started studying wolves forever ago, if you got a drop of blood from a wolf and a dog, you couldn't tell it apart by doing DNA fingerprinting. Now the advanced methods are available. Now you can do that, but that just shows how closely related they are. So wolves have a competitive mindset. That's just their evolutionary history in terms of behavior because they're territorial. And so a lot of people confuse territory with home range. A home range is a broadly overlapping area of use, like cougars and bears. You know, with cougars, you might have a tom, a male cougar that kind of lives amidst several females. And those females have overlapping areas of use. That's kind of their way of divvying up the landscape. Wolves are not that way. They're, you know, territory here, territory there, territory there, and they do overlap. They're, you know, they do trespass, and nothing's perfect, and you cheat if you can get away with it. But you usually cheat when that pack isn't there. And so they, you know, they advertise and protect their territory by howling and scent marking and patrolling, just, you know, walking the perimeter, not literally, but just in their kind of daily hunting travels. But, you know, so these territories are not perfectly staked out, but the different packs know about them. And so if they encounter another pack, they will have a conflict, and the conflict can be just a howling duel, it can be a chase, or it can be a fight, and the fights can lead to death. And so if your dog is part of that, they view the dog as a competitor, they could kill your dog, you know. And you know, the leading cause of wolf death in Yellowstone is other wolves. I mean, not every year anymore, but over the entire period of time, it's other wolves. So, you know, wolves kill other wolves, and without humans, that's the leading cause of mortality. And so throw a dog in, they could kill it. The other day here, and I meant to call the guy, I didn't get the details, but you know, we have houses all over park headquarters here, and people wake up in the morning, they let their dog out. You're not supposed to do that. You know, you live in a park, and there's a cost to living in the park. You got to have a dog on a leash or you know, tie it up. But not everybody does that because it's dark 30. You want your cup of coffee. You wake up, let the dog out, go make a pot of coffee, and the dog got killed by a coyote. You know, it was a coyote, not a wolf. So whose fault is that? The coyotes or the person who let it out? Are we going to take that coyote out? Like, you know, Ty was describing for a private landowner in Montana. This is not private land. It's a national park. It's public land. But you live here and there's rules. So, you know, that's just a question I'll put out there. So yeah, coyotes, wolves, dogs, it can be a clash. Yeah, it can be bad. And then wounding is the next level. You know, they kill them or the next level down. We've had residents in Mammoth go out in the morning and there's a dead elk in their backyard and 3 wolves are feeding on it. You know, did those wolves do anything wrong? You know, it's your yard and there's all kinds of elk around here that eat the green grass that are watered all summer and fall. And they just got them in their backyard that day. Do we have to drive down and haze those wolves to get out of their backyard? I mean, these are tough questions. But these things happen, and I think the reason I bring them up is you need to be prepared and think through them. You know, like Ty's, I've been listening to some of the stuff Ty's been saying. I got 2 dogs, and we ski and hike with them. And you know, part of my job is wolves. You know, I'm in the backcountry with those dogs. I am taking responsibility for them and their behavior, and I'm accepting the risk that there could be wolves around. So if they get killed, it's my fault. And secondly, so they don't get killed, I am having them on a leash or keeping them pretty close to me, voice commands. You know, I'm not just like, hey, they take off and I lose them for a while. They could get killed by a wolf, and that's my fault. So that's the cost of living in Montana. That's the cost of being a Montana citizen. Now the wolf comes in your yard, your private land, like Ty's talking about, seeking, you know, kind of, they're picking the fight. That might be different. Again, that's private land versus public land, the park, what I talked about. So yeah, you got to take responsibility for these things to live in a great state like Montana that's mostly wildland. You know, it's not, you know, some crowded state.
Thank you. Yeah, and you know, you've talked both of you about keeping your dogs close, et cetera, and the difference also between letting a dog out in the middle of the night, turning on a light, stepping out. Ty was talking about accompanying range riders, accompanying their dogs, not putting dogs out, deterrent, you know, dogs to deter wolves. Those dogs often do get killed, we find. People have been asking about the non-lethal methods for deterrence of depredation. One of them that's been, that Bear Creek Council knows a lot about is range riding does seem to be effective in a lot of cases. But back to dogs, Ty, and you get some of the hard questions. People are asking about how often dogs get caught in traps. And I'm going to follow up with another hunting question after that one. But since trapping is legal here, is that a problem here? You know, as a management tool, is that an issue?
Yeah, so, you know, trapping, people like to use traps for wolves. Traps, you can use traps for coyotes, and actually there's discussion right now about using snares for wolves in Montana. Idaho has been using snares for a while, and that's working through the legislative process right now, I believe. People can use snares for coyotes in Montana. For wolves, obviously, you'd use a heavier snare. And there are always, every year, it happens that there's 1 or 2 horror stories about people's dogs getting killed in traps, but I've also heard horror stories about people's dogs getting caught in beaver traps that are designed to, when the beaver swims into the water, to hold it underwater and drown it, and that happens to the dogs too. So that's, it's not just wolf traps out there, there's other kinds of traps out there, and hopefully, you know, you have experienced trappers that know how to not to set their traps in areas like near trailheads and stuff where people are constantly getting out with their dogs, and you know, you get out of your car and let your dog grab your skis, put your skis on and get ready to go, and your dog could have already found the trap and be stuck somewhere. So yeah, that's an issue in the state when you have wildland, you know, wildlands that people are using to harvest animals, right up against, you know, being co-used by people that are out recreating, and everybody's got 1, 2, or I have 3 dogs I like to take with me. So yeah, that's a problem, and it's not very common. Trappers are required to report it if a dog, you know, if there's a dog in their trap, whether it's alive or dead, they're required to report that. And obviously, if someone's dog gets caught in a trap or a snare, they're more than likely going to let one of our offices know about it, and probably all of Facebook know about it too. So it's the way these things go. People get pretty worked up when their pets get caught, and understandably so.
Right.
So
yeah. So question on wolves and den sites, wolves and rendezvous. You guys have both spoken about, the wolves don't tend to attack people at den sites or attack people at rendezvous. And we have a couple questions from people about what's the average age for matings. And I'd like you to also talk a little about the natural progression into dispersal, and how we get these wolves moving into other states and things like that, and how we see them, alone. I guess I'm lumping too much together here. Let me go back and just ask you to talk first about dens and rendezvous and the likelihood of being attacked by a wolf defending its den or rendezvous.
Is that one for me or Ty?
Why don't you start, Doug, and then Ty, anything you want to add, because I'm sure you both deal with dens.
Yeah, just quick, it's easy. Wolves reach sexual maturity at about 22 months. I mean, they're born in April. They can breed the next, they can breed as a yearling at 22 months. So their first year as a pup, they don't come into estrus. Their second year, they can. Often they don't, and that's just because of social circumstances. To get a breeding position, they typically are going to breed their first time. So roughly 2 is the earliest, but they might be 3, 4, 5 before they get their first breeding opportunity. Dens and rendezvous, wolves are, how do I say it, protective of that area, but they're not aggressive. So through my time working with wolves in the Midwest and Canada, Alaska, and Yellowstone, and the different people I've worked with, you eventually run into a rendezvous site or a den by mistake. In the park, if we know where they are, we want to protect those sites because, wolves are super adaptable and flexible, but if they have any areas that are sensitive for them, it's a den or a rendezvous site. So because our goal here in the park is to protect wildlife, we're going to, close areas around dens that are known. Hopefully remote locations are never known. The wolves are just left alone. And so, but everybody's blundered into these sites and nothing happens to you. But the wolf may follow you. It may alarm bark at you, stay with you. When you run into wolves, a normal encounter in the wilds is the wolf sees you and runs away. I mean, that's over 90% of the encounters I've had. They're going to be stubborn around their den or rendezvous. They're going to not want to budge because they have a vested interest in protecting those pups. They're not going to attack you. I've pulled, because of the reintroduction process, and I don't want to make this sound bad or hard-hearted, but I've pulled pups out of dens and, the female's right there. And, she's concerned and looks like, she's 10, 15 feet. I can't remember how far away. She's right there, not running away, but she's not growling, running at me. And I've got her pups, and she's not budging, and it is a little bit of a standoff. And I'm not saying I was feeling great, but nothing happened. And, so you walk around their den in the den vicinity, they're going to be concerned, and you can kind of tell it's a den or rendezvous site because they're not running away, and they're probably going to alarm bark, and they might escort you out of the area. Like you're like, oh, there's a wolf. I think I'll leave it alone. I mean, that's what I usually do when I see wildlife hiking. Oh, there's wildlife. I don't want to bother it. I think I'll just go this way. And then the wolf's following you. It's escorting you away from its den or rendezvous sites. It's concerned, not aggressive. That's not, the story come back and goes on. Ty was talking about Facebook. Wolf was aggressive to me. It followed me all this time. You could have walked right by its den or rendezvous site and had pups there, and it just wanted to make sure you're gone. Now, bears do that too. I mean, a grizzly bear with a cub, sometimes try this and see what happens. Is that sound cub sees you at 100 yards and you disappear, and if she doesn't know where you are because of the wind, she's going to come in looking for you because now she doesn't know where you are. They're way more protective than wolves. That's happened twice to my crews, and they've had to unload full cans of bear spray in her face. Everything was fine when the sound knew where the danger was. they went, oh, we're going to retreat and we're going to go down this gully and we're just going to move out of here. The wind wasn't right. Bear's like, what happened to that danger? She goes in on it, and all of a sudden you have an encounter. Wolves, same way. Where did the danger go? I'm going to track it. I'm going to follow it. I'm going to watch it. I want to make sure it leaves because my little puppies are stuck at the den. That's not like a sow with cubs that are mobile and moving around. Puppies are at a den at a rendezvous. That's their ball and chain for the summer. They're going to escort you out. That's not aggressive. That's just being a parent.
Thank you, Doug. That's great. Ty, what do you want to say about rendezvous, dens, or is that relevant for?
Yeah, I was gonna add that wolves will escort you out of the area, and then Doug really hit it. He covered it.
Right.
Yeah, and we see it all the time. And again, people that are hunting can take that as aggression when they're being watched or followed by a wolf. So something to think about. Yeah.
We have a question from someone asking, is there a problem in Montana with landowners killing wolves after claiming they're a threat when they are not a threat? And probably that's you, Ty.
Yeah. I don't think we have that much of a problem with that. Basically, the legislation is that if they're perceived as a threat, it's not like with a bear, like a grizzly bear, where it has to be defense of life. And that bear you better have bullets in the front of that bear, not the back end of that bear, because otherwise that's not really defensive of your life if the bear is running away from you. That doesn't really apply with wolves. They're there is what can be perceived as a threat. And it's a legitimate threat that those wolves could come in and kill calves anytime. If they aren't killing, we have a lot of wolves that it's not like they're out there killing cattle all the time. We have a lot of wolf packs that have been, there's cattle in the summer. Cattle are everywhere in Montana. They're ubiquitous. And a lot of times in flights, we see wolves bedded down in a stand of timber and the cows are grazing peacefully all around them and they could care less. Kind of like in the Serengeti when the lions are bedded down and the herd of zebras know that they ate last night. They're not hungry, so they're not concerned about them. And most of the time, those wolves leave. They don't even perceive cattle as a food option. But when they do, whether it's the calves are out on the range and they're small and about the size of a calf elk, and the wolves are in search mode for calf elk, and that's a black one or a red one instead of a brown one. So yeah, I don't think we have much of a problem with people, and people seem to know now that they can do that, and they'll report it to us most of the time. So it's not like there's a whole lot of that. There are people on the other side of the spectrum that think wolves are killing all the deer and elk, and we should use whatever means necessary and feasible to kill all the wolves. But that's a whole, there's people that feel that way and there's people that feel the exact opposite of that. So anyway.
Thank you.
Yep.
So I'm gonna end, this will be the last question. And we're going to come back around to you're encountering a wolf. You're encountering a wolf in a national park. You're encountering a wolf on a hiking trail, not in your yard, say, but you're out there. Is your recommendation, after taking a little look, if that wolf takes off, okay, one thing. Let's say that wolf is hanging and not acting quite like the sort of more normal behavior of wolves now. Do you recommend throwing rocks if you don't have your bear spray, yelling at them? Do you recommend, if you have a wolf entering a parking area where you are in Yellowstone or somewhere and kind of checking out the parking area, do you recommend honking horns and driving them off?
Well,
Doug, you can start, and Ty.
Talked about parking in Yellowstone. if you're in a parking area, I'd stay in your car right away. I mean, I'd use your car to your advantage. You see a wolf walk around a parking area in Yellowstone, that's not a good sign. So I'd stay in your car. For the backcountry situation, enjoy it. It's not going to happen very much that you get a look like that at a wolf, but I would stop and not advance for one, and monitor your distance. You want to have a buffer. Granted, we use this 100 yards as a rule for law enforcement, but in a backcountry situation, there's situations where it can be less than 100 yards, but you want to maintain a distance. It's just good. I do that with bison. You don't want to be next to any wild animal. I'm not singling out a wolf. And, and if you need to move back slowly, again, you're constantly watching the animal's behavior, sensing what it's doing. And if it's showing normal behavior, which means it's going to go about its business, everything's fine. And then if it doesn't, then you want to be prepared to take action, as I mentioned in my prepared comments, which is, don't run. If you're with someone, usually in Yellowstone, people are not hiking solo because it's bear country, but, group together, stand tall, make noise. Yeah, sure, I'd whip a rock myself. That's maybe not for everybody. And then I have my bear spray as my last resort. Boom, you're going to hit it with that. Everybody should have bear spray in Yellowstone. I'm at liberty to tell Ty what to do, but I'm using bear spray in Montana as well. And that's my last kind of defense against wolves. There's a researcher outside my office here waiting to talk to me. He blasted 1273 doing raven research this spring, and that was kind of the last thing that someone did to 1273 that turned the corner for him. Bear spray will probably stop everything. If it doesn't, fight like hell. You don't want to go down like you do with a grizzly play dead. It doesn't get to that point though, but I'm just kind of going through everything.
Right. Thank you. Yeah. Ty, do you have anything you want to add on this one?
Yeah, I mean, bear spray is great. I carry 2 cans of bear spray everywhere I go, just in case now. And I hand it to everybody else that's hiking with me too. So yeah, trying to think a couple things that Doug said that resonated. He kind of covered it all, I think, on there. One thing that did come up, and I'm curious about Doug's perception of this, like outside the park in the ranch lands, one thing I've noticed is with wolves, as far as like, this relates to the preventive aspect as well as like range riding. If they know there's a human there, they're going to get out of that area. If those cattle are being protected by, being monitored or watched closely by humans, there's less likely chance that they're going to experience depredation by wolves. And actually one of the most effective things is actually just an ATV. Hearing that ATV motor putting along on a ranch road, they can hear that thing from a long ways away and they get out of there because they know what that means. There's a human coming. And I've even seen it with wolves that are recovering from being captured and collared, and they're coming out of the drugs and they hear an ATV start up or something. They're trying to get out of there. It's crazy. And I don't know if wolves in the park are just totally conditioned to hearing snow wolves all the time.
I guess they are. Compared to that, people drive by them with some frequency. Yeah, they like walking the packed snow rather than the chest deep stuff. Yes.
Right. Yeah. Yep. Makes sense.
Well, I want to thank you both so much. This has been so interesting. And I have to acknowledge we have a lot of great questions that I've not been able to get to. And we're going to make an attempt to perhaps answer them when we post this online in some way. But for today, thank you both so much. And I do have a few last announcements. I do want to thank Northern Plains for 34 years of help and collaboration. Behind the scenes today, we have 2 Northern Plains webmasters, Matt Willey, our organizer, and Claire Overholt, our grassroots outreach coordinator. Northern Plains is our umbrella organization. We're an affiliate, and they've helped us achieve a lot of the things that we work on. If you want to register for our next program, we have been posting Living with Wolves webinar registration information. That program is going to take place March 17 at 1 p.m. You can also go to our Facebook page and probably find registration information very soon. We will have a Living with Bears program soon to be scheduled. You can become a member of Bear Creek Council by using the link in our chat room, by visiting our Facebook page or our web page. I would like to thank our sponsors today: Gardner Chamber of Commerce, Xanterra Parks and Resorts, Gardner Market, and Yellowstone Wolf Tracker. And once again, thank you so much to our speakers.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Bye.